Welcome to the Real Paranormal Stories podcast with your host, Christopher Buckner. Send your stories to realparanormalstoriespodcast@gmail.com. Royalty-free music provided by Kevin MacLeod and Tabletop Audio. And now, let's take a trip into the paranormal. This story comes from a Reddit user who wanted to remain anonymous. And this is their story. So when I was younger, I used to live in a trailer, so I don't know how old it is. To set the setting, I had a long bed, and at the end of the bed there was a dresser with enough room to put my legs in between the bed and the dresser. The door to my room was also connected to the living room. I liked to draw, so I would sit at the end of the bed and draw on the dresser. I remember that on the day this event took place, I was little and wanted to stay home all day, but my dad had wanted to go to Walmart. I was kind of mean about it, but ended up going with him. I believe almost 20 minutes later, when me and my dad were shopping, my mom called really panicked and asked my dad if I was with him, and then asked to talk to me. I don't remember what she told me over the phone, but I remember I was worried because it sounded like she had been crying. When I got home, she told me that she was vacuuming and had gone into my room, and she looked over to the end of the bed where I usually would be, and that she saw something that looked exactly like me sitting and staring forward at the wall. She said that after a couple of seconds, the thing turned to look at her, straight in the eyes, and slowly started to grin at her. She got scared and ran to the living room, where she called my brother crying. He ran from his room to the living room. From what he told me, she was crying a lot and was hugging him really hard. After I was told what happened, I was kind of freaked out, but did not think much about it. Later the same day, I wanted to draw, but my pencil had fallen through the space and onto the floor. I climbed under my bed to look for it and found 2 little Bibles hidden under there, although I always leave them in a different dresser, since I am not that religious, but never like to throw Bibles away, out of respect for my mom, who is religious. We currently do not live there anymore, but I never forgot about this event, since I don't know what could have done that. I do know that my mom was scared, because where she's from, if something like that happens, something bad is going to happen to the person. After that, we still experience little stuff in the home and in our current home, but we haven't experienced anything like that ever again. But I do remember that if we ever left to go somewhere or played outside, I would always look at my window expecting to see something looking at me. And that is their story. This story comes from Reddit user BitchinUsername3. And this is their story. Hey all. So I have had many spiritual or ghostly experiences, and I thought I'd start sharing some of them. Maybe some of you have had similar experiences and can relate, or maybe some of you will just have a good scare while reading. But nevertheless, here is one of my ghost stories. So, this happened in 2013 when I was 18 years old. It was sometime in the summer. I've forgotten exactly when, but that isn't really relevant. My friend, her boyfriend, and several of his friends were going to camp out for a couple of nights in Sulphur, Oklahoma. They invited me and my boyfriend at the time to join them. Everything had been great. We had a typical summer camping experience with lots of swimming, hiking, and arguing over correctly setting up the tents during the day. Nighttime comes around, and earlier in the evening we befriend some people camping near us and invite them over. We have a nice fire going, and we are all just sitting around, shooting the shit with our new friends and a bottle of Bacardi Zombie. Around midnight, we all start to get a little restless with our campsite. Our new friends tell us we should drive out to a cliff that overlooks the town. The moon was super bright that night, and we all thought that was a great idea. Kids, don't go hiking in the middle of the night. It's super dangerous. Also, don't drink if you're underage. I mean, you will anyway, but as a responsible adult, I have to say that. Anyway, 9 of us pile into my friend's boyfriend's truck. 6 of us in the bed of the truck, 3 in the cab. By the way, her boyfriend didn't drink, so he was definitely okay to drive. And another point I'd like to make is that I had only 1 drink this night, and at the point of our excursion, it had been a couple hours since I'd had it. So I definitely wasn't intoxicated, and certainly not intoxicated enough to hallucinate what I saw. So, where we were was a very dark, rural road headed up to this cliff area. There are a few houses up this way, but at the time, it was pretty desolate. There were also no cars except for us on this road at this time. My friend, my boyfriend, and myself were sitting on the driver's side out in the back of the truck. So we are outside enjoying the breeze. We come up to a spot on the road where we are passing a home. Again, there are some houses out here, but not a ton. And it's not a residential area. It's rural. So, no street lights. As we pass this house, I see a girl standing next to the mailbox at the end of the driveway. She's barefoot, dirty blonde hair that's just past her shoulders, light blue sundress with what appeared to be a flower print, and she's just standing there motionless and facing the road. Her face was completely expressionless. I may have thought she was a mannequin had she not turned just her head and held my gaze as we drove by, and kept staring until we were out of sight of each other. I instantly had chills head to toe and felt incredibly uneasy. She looked to be a teenager herself or a very young adult. She was alone and the house was completely dark. No porch light or any light coming from the windows. I turned to my friend and boyfriend and asked if they had seen that, and I exclaimed how creepy that was. They agreed, but didn't have too much else to say. Naturally, I thought whomever lived there was just trying to scare whoever drove by looking like a stereotypical ghost girl. But what made me so uneasy was the idea that she would have just been standing out there alone for who knows how long, all in the hopes that someone might drive by. Keep in mind, this was the middle of the night and we hadn't passed a single other car the whole trip up to the cliff. It just wasn't sitting right with me. We continue on and make it to the cliff and enjoy a moonlit mini hike and enjoyed the view over this sleepy town. Without any other incidents, I might add. A few years down the line, my friend and I are having spooky discussions and I brought up that night. I asked her if she remembered that night and how creepy that was. She told me she had a confession to make. She said, "You've brought that night up a few times since then, and I have to be honest. I never actually saw anyone standing there. None of us did. We actually thought you were trying to scare us, so we played along." She went on to tell me that she does remember the house in question, and she does remember the mailbox and all of that. But there was never a person standing next to the road beside that mailbox. And everyone else in the car? They hadn't seen her either. They all thought I was full of shit and just trying to scare everyone. What the fuck did I see? I remember so many details of what she looked like, almost in a frame-by-frame sequence. I remember the uneasy feeling I got as soon as I saw her, and how it felt like she was staring directly at me. At the time, I thought she was just staring at all of us. But maybe she was, in fact, only staring at me. My friend had since told me this story thoroughly creeps her out now, knowing that I was dead serious about seeing her, and I definitely wasn't fucking around. And I'm also way more creeped out knowing I'm the only one who saw her. I just don't know what to think of it. And that is their story. That's all for this episode of the Real Paranormal Stories podcast. If you liked what you heard, please leave us a review anywhere this podcast can be found.